Elias Thorne, a man whose name graced luxury furniture and bespoke interiors, surveyed the worn wooden shelves of the old public library. Despite his empire of exquisite craftsmanship, a familiar emptiness gnawed at him, a silent weight beneath the veneer of his success. His gaze, usually sharp, held a distant, melancholic quality. The library director, Eleanor Green, a woman whose kind eyes missed little, gestured for Elias to take the worn armchair opposite her desk. Her office, a cozy labyrinth of stacked books and the faint aroma of aged paper, felt a world away from Elias's polished corporate headquarters. "Elias, thank you for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice soft. "Our beloved St. Jude's Church is struggling with renovations, particularly the old pews. I was hoping Thorne and Company might consider donating some expertise, perhaps a few hours of your renowned skill." Elias, a titan of industry, felt a flicker of annoyance, a charity case beneath his status. Yet the old church held a quiet place in the town's heart, and his company's reputation demanded a certain civic grace. "Of course, Eleanor," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll send someone to assess the damage." The heavy oak doors of St. Jude's Old Town Church creaked open, admitting Elias into a realm of hushed reverence and fading grandeur. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the stained glass windows, illuminating centuries of silent prayer. His professional eye immediately registered the peeling paint, the worn kneelers, the subtle sag in the floorboards. It was a beautiful, decaying testament to time. The air, heavy with the scent of old wood and forgotten incense, seemed to whisper secrets. A faint but rhythmic tap-tap-tap, the unmistakable sound of a mallet on wood, drew his attention from the main aisle. It emanated from a small side chapel, a quiet corner usually reserved for contemplation. Stepping into the chapel, Elias found himself in a scene of industrious devotion. A young man, probably in his early 20s, meticulously sanded a newly repaired pew, his brow furrowed in concentration. Woodworking tools lay scattered around him, each gleaming with care. Elias's gaze, however, wasn't on the young man's earnest face, but on the pew itself. Specifically, on its joinery. His breath hitched. It was unmistakable. A distinctive, intricate starburst pattern where the wood met, a signature he knew intimately. It was his company's signature. A tremor, cold and profound, ran through Elias. Disbelief warred with a gut-wrenching recognition. How? How could this be? The young man, sensing Elias's intense stare, looked up, a friendly, sawdust-smudged smile spreading across his face. "Oh, hello there! Sorry, didn't hear you come in. Just finishing up this old beauty." Elias struggled to find his voice, his mind reeling. That joint," he managed, pointing a shaky finger at the starburst pattern. "Where did you learn that technique?" The young man, Leo Maxwell, puffed out his chest slightly, beaming with innocent pride. "Oh, this is Grandpa Art's special joint. My grandfather, Arthur Finch, taught me. Said it was his own design, strong as a rock, and pretty too." The name, Arthur Finch, struck Elias with the force of a physical blow. His world tilted. Arthur Finch, the truth, long buried, crashed down upon him, shattering his carefully constructed reality. A name, a technique, and suddenly a lifetime of success felt like a house of cards. What secret was so powerful? Elias Thorne's luxury sedan, a silent fortress of leather and glass, sat idling outside St. Jude's. Twilight deepened, painting the old church steeple in hues of bruised violet, but Elias saw nothing but the phantom image of a starburst joint. Arthur Finch. The name echoed in his skull, a jarring discord in the symphony of his carefully constructed life. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a desperate wave of denial washing over him. It couldn't be. A coincidence. A lesser imitation. A trick of the light, perhaps. Or a memory playing cruel games. But even as he tried to construct these mental barriers, the undeniable truth began to seep through. Arthur's hands, Arthur's meticulous eye, Arthur's quiet genius. The weight of 3 decades of stolen glory pressed down, suffocating him in the opulent confines of his car. His own masterpiece, now a mirror reflecting a deeply buried lie. Could he deny it any longer? Driven by a desperate, gnawing need for validation, or perhaps final, damning proof, Elias Thorne sped to his workshop, The vast space, usually a sanctuary of precision and order, felt accusatory in the stark glow of its spotlights. Polished tools gleamed from their racks, reflecting his frantic, haunted eyes. He moved with a practiced, almost violent efficiency, pulling a custom-built lectern, a piece featuring his company's celebrated starburst joint, from a dust-free display. His fingers, usually so sure, trembled as they traced the intricate pattern. He scrutinized every angle, every perfectly angled ray, comparing it to the image of the church pew etched into his mind. No bosla. The similarity was not just undeniable, it was absolute. The signature of Arthur Finch, the man he had betrayed, was staring back at him from his own acclaimed work. A creeping dread, cold and absolute, settled deep in his gut. Subtle questions, carefully veiled curiosity. Elias was digging, but what truth would he unearth? The next morning, in his mahogany-paneled home office, Elias Thorne began his subtle campaign of inquiry. He sat at his sprawling desk, antique maps spread beneath his gaze, a phone pressed to his ear. His voice, usually so commanding, was carefully modulated, casual. "Yes, just following up on that donation. I heard there's a young man, Maxwell, volunteering. Talented, I hear. Any family history in woodworking. Finch, was it? Arthur Finch." He made a few discreet calls to old associates, town council members, even the local historical society. The information he gleaned was maddeningly vague, yet consistent. Arthur Finch had been a quiet, skilled craftsman, known for his integrity and humble demeanor. He'd lived a simple life, respected by the few who knew him, never seeking grand recognition. Elias hung up, a fresh wave of unease washing over him. Control was slipping. The church called to him, a constant reminder of the truth he tried to bury. His peace was crumbling. In the days that followed, Elias Thorne found himself a prisoner of his own conscience. His meticulously planned schedule, once a source of pride, now felt irrelevant. He would drive past St. Jude's, ostensibly on his way to a meeting, only to find himself parked down the street, watching. He'd sip coffee at the local cafe, his gaze inexplicably drawn to the church steeple, a dark, silent sentinel on the horizon. More than once, he saw Leo Maxwell, the young volunteer, entering or leaving the old church, a toolbox in hand, a determined spring in his step. Each sighting was a fresh stab of guilt, a constant, unsettling echo from the past. His empire, his accolades, his carefully cultivated life, all now felt hollow, overshadowed by the undeniable truth housed within that humble, aging church. His peace, once a formidable fortress, was crumbling. A forgotten photograph, a smiling face from the past. It was proof, and it tore at his soul. One rain-swept afternoon, Elias reluctantly ascended to his cluttered attic, a space he rarely visited. Dust motes danced in a single shaft of light filtering through a grimy window, illuminating forgotten relics of a younger, different Elias. He found an old, worn cardboard box, labeled simply "Early Days." Inside, beneath a jumble of old blueprints and rusty tools, lay a faded black and white photograph. It showed a much younger Elias, his hair wild, a genuine, unburdened smile on his face. His arm was slung around a man with kind eyes and a paint-smudged apron, Arthur Finch. They stood in a bustling workshop, laughing, their camaraderie palpable. The image evoked a potent mix of nostalgia for a lost friendship, profound regret for his actions, and an overwhelming wave of shame. The proof was undeniable. A week later, the familiar scent of old paper and quiet ambition filled Eleanor Green's cramped office. Elias Thorne sat opposite her, his posture as impeccable as ever, but a subtle tremor in his hands hinted at a restless mind. "Eleanor," he began, his voice smooth, practiced, "Thorne & Company has been considering expanding our community outreach. We're deeply impressed by the efforts at St. Jude's, particularly with the church's historical significance. We'd like to offer to fund the Asterix's entire renovation, a complete pro bono overhaul." He paused, letting the generosity of the offer hang in the air. Naturally, our expert craftsmen would handle all the woodworking, including those beautiful old pews. Eleanor, usually unflappable, blinked. "Elias, that's remarkably generous. We're truly grateful." But young Leo Maxwell has already begun such wonderful work on the pews. He's quite talented, a real asset. Elias offered a faint, tight smile. Of course. But for a project of this scale, a comprehensive, professional touch would be essential. Wouldn't you agree? Eleanor's gaze lingered on Elias for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in her kind eyes before she nodded slowly. I suppose it would. Later that afternoon, Elias found himself once more in the quiet side chapel of St. Jude's. The air was thick with the scent of pine and linseed oil, and Leo Maxwell was meticulously sanding a newly repaired pew. Elias approached, his expensive shoes silent on the worn floor. "Impressive work, young man," he stated, his voice a carefully modulated blend of professional appraisal and veiled scrutiny. He ran a gloved finger over the distinctive starburst joint. "This technique, it's certainly unique. Are you certain of its structural integrity? It seems unconventional." Leo looked up, his face smudged with sawdust, but beaming with innocent pride. "Oh, it's incredibly strong, Mr. Thorne. Grandpa Art always said it was the best joint for resisting torsion. He taught me how to carve each ray just so, interlocking them perfectly. He called it his signature joint, said it was like a star holding everything together." Elias's jaw tightened. Every word from Leo, every enthusiastic gesture, was a hammer blow against his carefully constructed facade. The boy's pure, untainted dedication, his reverence for Grandpa Art's genius, made Elias's own past actions feel not just morally ambiguous, but monstrous. His plan to subtly discredit the joint, to reclaim the narrative, crumbled before Leo's earnest sincerity. That night, Elias Thorne lay in his vast, silent bed, the silk sheets a luxurious prison. Sleep was a distant, mocking promise. Leo's innocent words echoed in the cavernous expanse of his mind. Grandpa Art's special joint, Arthur Finch. The name, once a forgotten whisper, was now a roaring gale, tearing through the carefully crafted walls of his conscience. He rose, walking to the full-length mirror, his reflection a stranger in the dim light. He saw not the celebrated master carpenter, the titan of industry, but a man haunted. His empire, built on the stolen brilliance of another, now felt like a house of cards, hollow and precarious. Every polished tool in his workshop, every award lining his office, every piece of furniture bearing the Thorne & Company starburst joint, now felt like a brand of shame. The pride he had once taken in his success was replaced by a profound self-loathing, a gnawing emptiness that wealth could not fill. The truth, long buried, was demanding to be heard, its voice growing louder with each passing sleepless hour. The next afternoon, Elias found himself, almost unconsciously, drawn back to the library. He sat in his car across the street observing. He saw Leo emerge, not with tools, but with a small, rickety wooden chair. An elderly woman, her face etched with worry, approached him. Leo knelt, examining the chair with the same gentle care he applied to the church pews. He spoke softly, reassuringly, then took the chair, promising to fix it. Elias watched the genuine admiration in the woman's eyes, the easy respect Leo commanded from the community. It wasn't about money or reputation. It was about kindness, skill, and an unwavering integrity. A flicker ignited within Elias, a spark of something beyond self-preservation. This wasn't just about his guilt, or the stolen technique. It was about Arthur, a man whose quiet decency and talent had continued to touch lives through his grandson. Perhaps, Elias thought, it was about restoring Arthur's rightful place, not just burying his own shame. Late into the evening, Elias sat in his study, the room usually a sanctuary of controlled order, now a battlefield of old regrets and burgeoning resolve. The flicker of hope from the afternoon had solidified into a fierce determination. No more hiding, no more attempts to manipulate or control. He pulled out an old, leather-bound business directory from a bottom drawer, its pages yellowed with age. He flipped through it, then began to make notes on a crisp pad of paper, his pen scratching with renewed purpose. He would find out everything. What truly happened to Arthur Finch after their partnership ended? Where had he gone? What had his life become? This was no longer about mitigating damage. It was about unearthing the full, unvarnished truth. His hands trembled, a mix of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. This decision, to actively seek the truth, was the first real step on a path he had avoided for decades, a journey towards a redemption he wasn't sure he deserved. The air in the workshop was a fragrant symphony of pine and oak, thick with the dance of sawdust motes in the morning sun. 35 years ago, this place had been more than just a workspace. It was a crucible of dreams for two young men, Elias Thorne and Arthur Finch. They worked side by side, the rhythm of their planes and chisels a testament to their burgeoning partnership. Thorne and Finch. Elias had declared one evening, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's going to be a name that means quality art, across the whole state." Arthur, quieter, with a thoughtful intensity in his eyes, had merely smiled, more concerned with the perfect curve of a leg than the grandiosity of a name. It was Arthur, a quiet genius, who had first sketched the intricate, interlocking pattern on a scrap of pine, a design that would soon be known as the starburst joint. "Look, Elias," he'd explained, his finger tracing the elegant lines. "The way the grain meets, the way the pressure distributes. It's stronger than any dovetail, and beautiful besides." Elias had leaned in, genuine awe in his younger eyes, admiring not just the cleverness, but the sheer artistry. He saw the beauty, yes, but he also saw the potential, a unique signature, a path to something bigger. Weeks later, the clinking of glasses in a dimly lit bar offered a stark contrast to the honest clang of hammers. Elias, emboldened by a few too many beers and the intoxicating whisper of ambition, leaned across the scarred wooden table. "Art, about the joint," he began, his voice a conspiratorial murmur. "We should patent it, get ahead of the curve." Arthur, nursing a single ale, nodded agreeably. "Good idea, Elias. Protect our work." Elias's gaze sharpened, a calculating glint in his eyes. "For speed and efficiency, it might be best if I handle the paperwork. Put my name on the initial filings. Streamline the process, you know." Arthur, ever trusting, ever focused on the purity of the craft, shrugged. "Whatever makes it easier, Elias, as long as the work gets done." A prick of conscience, sharp and fleeting, pierced Elias. He saw the open honesty in Arthur's eyes, the complete lack of suspicion. For a split second, he considered retracting. But then the vision of his name, alone, on the patent, flared brighter. The path to individual glory, unburdened by a shared name, beckoned. He suppressed the feeling, burying it under a layer of justification. It was for the business, after all, for their business. Years blurred into a montage of relentless growth. The rustic workshop was replaced by a gleaming, modern factory floor, where the bold banner of Thorne & Company dominated. Elias Thorne, now a sharp-suited, middle-aged man, strode through his burgeoning empire, the starburst joint proudly displayed on every piece of high-end furniture, marketed as his own innovative design. Success, swift and undeniable, coated his life in a golden sheen. But amidst the triumph, a quieter, sadder scene unfolded. Arthur Finch, unable to reconcile the partner he knew with the man Elias had become, simply packed his tools one gray morning. No dramatics, no arguments, just a quiet, dignified departure. Elias saw him go, a fleeting pang of regret twisting in his gut. A good man, a true friend, was walking away. But the roar of the machines, the hum of ambition, and the intoxicating scent of success quickly drowned out that small, insistent voice of conscience. The empire was built. The cost, a forgotten friendship, was a price Elias had convinced himself he could afford. Back in the present, the glow of Elias's laptop illuminated his weary face in his opulent study. He clicked through Old Town records, obituaries, and archived local newspaper articles. The truth, stark and unembellished, began to form. Arthur Finch had lived a quiet, humble life, remaining in the same town Elias had left behind. A freelance carpenter, a woodworking instructor at the community college, a man whose hands were always busy, whose spirit remained untainted. Elias found the obituary, just a few years old. Arthur Finch, beloved father and grandfather, passed peacefully, survived by daughter Sarah and grandson Leo Maxwell. The name echoed in the silent room. Leo. Arthur had never sought to reclaim his invention, never challenged Elias's patent, never spoke ill of his former partner. He had simply chosen dignity over confrontation, quiet craft over public acclaim. The realization struck Elias like a physical blow. Arthur had been a better man, a good man, in a way Elias had never dared to be. Elias stood in the hushed interior of St. Jude's, a silent observer in the back pew. He watched Leo, unaware, explaining the starburst joint to an elderly churchgoer, his voice filled with an infectious enthusiasm. "Grandpa Art always said it was like a fingerprint, Mrs. Henderson." Leo beamed. "Strong, unique, and built to last." Every word from Leo's mouth was a dagger, twisting deeper into Elias's soul. The young man's earnestness, his complete lack of pretension, made Elias's own past actions feel even more egregious, more monstrous. He saw Arthur's integrity reflected in Leo's eyes, in his gentle hands, in his pure dedication to the craft. The weight of the legacy he had stolen, the good man he had betrayed, pressed down on Elias with an unbearable force. The truth was inescapable. It wasn't just a technique. It was Arthur's very soul, now shining through his grandson. Elias turned and walked away, a new, heavy resolve in his step. He knew, with chilling clarity, that this unbearable burden could no longer be ignored. A soft, warm light spilled from the single bare bulb in Leo Maxwell's workshop, chasing the evening shadows into the corners of the small, cluttered room. The air was thick with the comforting scent of sawdust and linseed oil, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of Elias's own domain. Leo, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously planed a piece of cherry wood, his movements fluid and practiced. On a nearby shelf, a framed, sepia-toned photograph of a kind-faced older man, Arthur Finch, watched over him. "Almost there, Grandpa Art," Leo murmured, his voice gentle. "Just like you taught me. Let the wood speak, Leo. Don't force it." He chuckled softly, a memory of his grandfather's patient hands guiding his own. The starburst joint, a unique pattern of interlocking wood, was more than just a technique. It was a cherished secret, a language only he and Arthur truly understood, a silent bond reaching across time. He saw true respect, earned through kindness and honest work, a stark contrast to his own gilded cage. The following morning, Elias Thorne found himself, almost against his will, at the bustling local farmer's market. From behind the shade of a large oak, he watched Leo. The young man moved easily through the crowd, offering advice to a woman whose antique rocking chair had a splintered leg, then selling a small, intricately carved wooden bird to a delighted child. "That's Art's grandson," a woman commented to her friend, her voice warm with affection. "Just as talented, and just as kind." Another nodded. Arthur would be so proud. Never seen a bad piece of work from either of them. Elias felt a pang, sharp and unwelcome. Here, in this vibrant, authentic community, Leo commanded a genuine, unbought respect. It was a stark, painful contrast to Elias's own reputation, meticulously built on wealth, and a legacy he knew, deep down, was a lie. A moment of shared craft, a flicker of camaraderie. But a powerful secret kept them worlds apart. Back in the quiet reverence of the church chapel, Elias found himself once more watching Leo work. This time, he didn't just observe, he approached. "You're getting a good finish on that pine," Elias offered, his voice a little gruffer than intended. "But if you adjust your plane's blade by a hair, you might find it cuts even cleaner against the grain." Leo looked up, surprised but receptive. "Really? Grandpa Art used to say something similar, but I never quite got it right." For a fleeting moment, as Elias demonstrated a minor adjustment, a shared passion ignited between them. They discussed wood types, the nuances of tools, a comfortable camaraderie settling in. Elias felt a yearning, a deep pull towards this genuine connection, this honest exchange of craft. But the enormity of his secret, the betrayal that defined his success, hung heavy in the air, an invisible wall. He abruptly excused himself, the facade of a simple shared moment too heavy to maintain. His empire, his wealth, yet he was utterly alone. The price of his secret was his soul. That evening, Elias sat alone at his immense dining table, the polished mahogany reflecting the crystal chandelier above. The room, designed for lavish gatherings, echoed with an oppressive silence. Each clink of his fork against the porcelain plate sounded deafening in the stillness. He thought of Leo, likely sharing a simple meal with his family, surrounded by laughter and genuine affection. Elias's empire, his wealth, the carefully curated luxury of his life, felt hollow, a gilded cage. The solitude was a stark reminder of the silence he had maintained about Arthur, about the stolen legacy. It amplified his regret, whispering that his material success had come at the ultimate cost, his soul. The past laid bare, documents of betrayal. Elias was ready to confess, but would it be enough? Late into the night, Elias Thorne moved through his study with a newfound, almost feverish purpose. No longer lost in contemplation, he was gathering weapons for a battle he knew he must fight with himself. From a locked drawer, he pulled out old, brittle partnership agreements, the faded original patent application, and the small, worn photograph of himself and a younger Arthur, laughing. He laid them out on his vast desk, a timeline of his betrayal. He began to draft notes, not for a business proposal, but for a confession, rehearsing the agonizing words he would speak. A tremor of fear ran through him, but beneath it, a strange, quiet sense of liberation began to emerge. The truth, however painful, was finally demanding to be faced. He sought a legal loophole, but the law couldn't mend a broken conscience. His truth was a burden no contract could erase. Elias Thorne sat across from Mr. Stern, his corporate lawyer, in an office high above the city. The panoramic view of the financial district, usually a source of quiet satisfaction, now felt like a gilded cage. Elias, ever the pragmatist, had hoped for a clean solution, a legal maneuver to sidestep the moral reckoning that loomed. He outlined a hypothetical, a partnership decades ago, a shared invention, one partner patenting it solely, the other quietly disappearing. Stern, a man whose tailored suits matched his cold, precise logic, listened impassively. "Statute of limitations, Mr. Thorne," he stated, adjusting his spectacles. "It's ancient history. No legal recourse for the hypothetical party." The words were an absolution, yet they offered Elias no peace. The law could dismiss a claim, but it could not quiet the gnawing shame in his gut. His problem, he realized with a chilling clarity, was not legal. It was profoundly, irrevocably moral. Words failed him. How could he explain a lifetime of lies on a single page? This truth needed a voice. Back in the hushed expanse of his study, late into the night, Elias tried to write. He pulled out a crisp sheet of paper, the ink of his expensive pen poised. "Dear Leo, he began, but the words faltered. How could he distill decades of ambition, pride, and betrayal into a few polite sentences? He crumpled the first attempt, then a second, a third. Each draft felt hollow, a self-serving justification rather than a genuine apology. He considered offering money, a generous settlement, but the thought curdled in his stomach. This wasn't a business transaction. This was a confession. It demanded more than ink on paper, more than a distant gesture. It demanded his presence, his vulnerability, a direct act of humility that terrified him more than any boardroom battle. He stared at the crumpled paper, a silent testament to his inadequacy, then slowly stood, a new resolve hardening in his eyes. A dream, a ghost from the past, and a quiet gaze that spoke louder than any accusation. Elias knew what he had to do. Deep in the night, a vivid dream pulled Elias into the past. He stood in their old workshop, the air thick with sawdust and possibility. Arthur Finch was there, younger, his hands moving with quiet purpose as he silently crafted the starburst joint. The familiar pattern emerged, perfect and intricate, under Arthur's skilled touch. Then, Arthur looked up. His eyes, usually bright with creative fire, held a gentle, profound sadness as they met Elias's. There was no anger, no accusation, only a deep, quiet disappointment that pierced Elias to his core. He woke with a gasp, the image seared into his mind. Arthur's silent gaze had spoken volumes, a spiritual call to action. It solidified his resolve to confess, spurred by an agonizing guilt and an overwhelming yearning for forgiveness that only truth could bring. He sat up, the dream a catalyst, a new determination burning in his eyes. The call was made, the meeting set, the truth was finally about to be revealed. But how would Leo react? The next morning, Elias made the call. His hand, usually steady, trembled slightly as he dialed Eleanor Green's number. His voice, though carefully controlled, held an unusual tremor as he requested a meeting with Leo Maxwell, ostensibly to discuss the church renovation project. Eleanor, pleased by his renewed interest, readily agreed to arrange a time for them to meet at St. Jude's. "Leo will be delighted, Mr. Thorne," she chirped, oblivious to the true weight of the request. Elias hung up, a strange cocktail of intense fear and an exhilarating sense of purpose coursing through him. The first step was taken. The confrontation was set. The truth, long buried, was finally about to see the light. He glanced towards the distant steeple of St. Jude's, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. A worn compass, a forgotten promise. Elias was ready to confront his past and find his true north once again. Before leaving for the church, Elias paused in his study. He opened a hidden drawer in his antique desk, a sanctuary for long-forgotten personal items. His fingers brushed against a small, tarnished silver compass, its brass casing worn smooth with age. It had been a gift from Arthur, years ago, when they were still partners, still friends. "Always find your true north, Elias," Arthur had said, his voice warm with genuine concern. Elias traced the etched lines of the compass rose, remembering the innocent ambition they had once shared. He would bring it with him. This compass, a tangible link to a past he had both cherished and betrayed, would be his token of truth. It was a silent promise to Arthur, a vow that he would finally face his past, seek his true north, and set things right. With a heavy but resolute stride, Elias Thorne walked out his front door. The side chapel of St. Jude's Church was quiet, the afternoon light filtering through a dusty stained glass window, casting muted colors on the worn wooden pews. Elias Thorne stood, hands clasped behind his back, the silver compass a cool, heavy presence in his pocket. He watched Leo Maxwell, who was meticulously arranging a few chisels on a workbench, seemingly unaware of the seismic shift about to occur. "Leo," Elias began, his voice surprisingly steady, though a tremor ran through him. He bypassed all the usual pleasantries, the small talk he had rehearsed and discarded 100 times. "I asked you to meet me here because there's something I need to tell you. Something important, something that should have been said a very long time ago." Leo, sensing the unusual gravity in Elias's tone, set down a plane and turned fully, his brow furrowed with a mixture of confusion and concern. He nodded, his youthful eyes wide and attentive. Elias took a deep breath, the scent of old wood and beeswax filling his lungs, a poignant reminder of the life he had once shared. He began to speak of a partnership, of two young men with shared dreams, his voice trembling at first, then gaining a fragile conviction as the words, long buried, finally found their way out. Leo listened, his expression shifting from polite attention to dawning disbelief. The air in the small chapel grew thick with unspoken history. The words, once locked away, now poured from Elias Thorne, raw and unvarnished. He confessed it all. The youthful ambition that curdled into greed, the subtle manipulation, the patent filed solely in his name. "I presented it as my own, Leo," Elias admitted, his voice hoarse, the shame a palpable force in the room. "Arthur, your grandfather, he was a master, pure of heart. He saw the craft, not the commerce. He trusted me." Elias recounted how Arthur, faced with Elias's betrayal, had simply and quietly resigned from their fledgling partnership, choosing dignity over a bitter fight. Arthur had built his own humble life, never once publicly challenging Elias's fraudulent claim, even as Thorne and Company rose to prominence on the back of the starburst joint. Elias reached into his pocket, pulling out the faded photograph of two young men laughing, covered in sawdust. He handed it to Leo. "This was us, before I let ambition blind me." Then he placed the tarnished silver compass into Leo's palm. "He gave me this, said, 'Always find your true north, Elias. I lost my way, Leo. For decades I lost my way.'" Leo stared at the photograph, then at the compass, his fingers tracing the starburst pattern on the pew beside him. The truth, raw and painful, poured out. A stolen legacy, a broken friendship, and a lifetime of regret, all laid bare in the quiet solemnity of the chapel. Leo Maxwell stood frozen, the faded photograph and the silver compass heavy in his hands. His eyes, usually so bright with youthful enthusiasm, were wide with shock, then slowly, agonizingly filled with tears. Not tears of anger directed at Elias, but a profound, aching sorrow for his grandfather. "Grandpa Art," he whispered, the name a broken prayer. He looked from the photograph of the smiling young Arthur to the distinctive starburst joint on the newly repaired pew, its elegance a silent testament to his grandfather's genius. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening clarity, the unique technique, his grandfather's quiet, humble life, Elias Thorne's sudden, intense interest. Leo saw the truth in Elias's tormented, bloodshot eyes, not a cunning lie, but a lifetime of buried guilt finally unearthed. His own anger, surprisingly, was muted, overshadowed by a deep, inherited injustice. He felt the weight of Arthur's quiet suffering, the years of unacknowledged brilliance. He never said anything, Leo murmured, looking at Elias, a question and a plea in his voice. He just kept working, always said the work was the reward. Elias could only nod, his throat tight, accepting whatever storm of emotion Leo chose to unleash. The emotional climax hung heavy, a shared burden of past and present. Leo's gaze drifted back to the silver compass in his hand, a small, polished disc that felt like a tangible link to a man he suddenly understood anew. "Grandpa Art never spoke ill of anyone," Leo said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "He just kept working. He loved his craft more than anything." A fresh wave of sorrow washed over Leo as he thought of his grandfather, a man whose quiet brilliance had been overshadowed, his rightful recognition stolen. It's a shame he never got the credit he deserved. Elias, deeply moved by Leo's lack of malice, felt a profound shift within him. The weight of his guilt, though still present, began to morph into a fierce resolve. "He will, Leo," Elias said, his voice firm, tinged with a raw earnestness. "He will. I will make sure of it. I will publicly acknowledge Arthur's invention. And I want to mentor you. I want to help you build a legacy worthy of his name." He extended his hand, not as a magnate, but as a humbled man offering genuine amends. It was a shared legacy, a path to healing. Elias's confession wasn't the end, but a new beginning. Later that day, the side chapel was no longer just a place of confession, but of quiet, focused work. Elias Thorne, having shed the heavy armor of his success, stood beside Leo Maxwell at the workbench. "Show me," Elias said, his voice humble, a stark contrast to his usual authoritative tone. "Show me the finer points of Grandpa Art's special joint. I want to truly understand it." Leo, his initial shock giving way to a hopeful determination, picked up a piece of wood. With gentle, practiced movements, he began to demonstrate the intricate cuts and precise angles of the starburst joint, explaining each step with the same quiet passion Arthur Finch must have once possessed. Elias watched, truly learning, his hands, once accustomed to commanding, now eager to follow. They worked side by side, the rhythmic scrape of chisels and the soft rasp of sandpaper filling the air. For Elias, a deep sense of peace settled over him. He was finally working on the joint with integrity, not just his hands, but his heart fully engaged. Two carpenters, one shared legacy. The starburst joint was finally home. The grand conference room at Thorne & Company headquarters, usually a theater for quarterly triumphs, hummed with a different kind of tension. Reporters, industry figures, and even a few curious townspeople, including Eleanor Green, filled every seat. Elias Thorne, looking older, yes, but undeniably lighter, stood at the podium. The arrogance had been shed, replaced by a quiet, formidable courage. He cleared his throat, the mic amplifying the subtle tremor in his voice. "For decades," he began, his gaze sweeping the room, "Thorne & Company has been synonymous with quality, with innovation, but a significant part of that legacy, our signature, starburst joint, was not, in fact, my innovation alone." A ripple went through the room. Elias paused, took a deep breath. It was the genius of my former partner, Arthur Finch, a man whose quiet brilliance I allowed my ambition to overshadow. He then detailed the patenting, the quiet departure, the years of unacknowledged work. Today, he declared, his voice firm, we right that wrong. We are establishing the Arthur Finch Legacy Fund to support aspiring woodworkers. And I am proud to introduce Arthur's grandson, Leo Maxwell, not just as its first beneficiary, but as a future partner in what will now be known as Thorne and Finch. Leo stepped forward, a nervous but proud smile on his face, as the room erupted in a standing ovation. The Thorne and Company workshop, once a monument to Elias's singular vision, now vibrated with a new, collaborative energy. A sleek new sign, Thorne and Finch Crafting Legacies, gleamed above the entrance. Inside, the staff, initially bewildered, had embraced the rebranding, invigorated by the honesty it represented. Leo, no longer a shy volunteer, moved with confidence, discussing new projects with Elias, his ideas genuinely valued. Elias watched him, a quiet satisfaction spreading through him, a feeling far richer than any past acquisition. He saw Arthur's name finally given its due, and Leo thriving, carrying forward a legacy that was now truly shared. The workshop was no longer just a place of production. It was a space of redemption, built on a foundation of truth. In Elias's spacious private study, once a solitary realm, the warm glow of desk lamps illuminated blueprints spread across the mahogany table. Elias, patient and thorough, elucidated complex business principles, guiding Leo through market trends and sustainable sourcing. Leo, in turn, with his youthful enthusiasm, reminded Elias of the simple, unadulterated joy of shaping wood, of the quiet magic in a perfectly planed surface, a counterpoint to the corporate pressures Elias had long navigated. Their conversations flowed easily, a blend of strategy and soul, technique and philosophy. What had begun as mentorship had blossomed into a profound bond, a mutual exchange of wisdom and passion, healing decades of unspoken regret. Months later, the side chapel of St. Jude's Church gleamed, its old wood restored to a warm, inviting luster. Elias, Leo, and Eleanor Green stood together, admiring the newly finished pews. The starburst joint, now openly celebrated as Arthur Finch's genius, was a focal point of quiet pride. Elias reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the cool, smooth metal of the silver compass. Arthur gave this to me once, he murmured, more to himself than to them. Said, always find your true north, Elias. His gaze drifted across the restored chapel, a testament to what honesty could rebuild. He had found his true north, not in wealth or acclaim, but in the courage to confess, and the grace of a shared legacy. In Elias's sprawling garden, beneath the gentle afternoon sun, he and Leo shared coffee, the scent of blooming jasmine sweet in the air. I spent a lifetime chasing success, Leo, Elias mused, his voice soft. Had everything, on paper. But I never felt this, content. Not truly. He looked at the young man beside him, a genuine smile on his face. Arthur, your grandfather, he didn't have much by the world's standards. But his true wealth wasn't in money. It was in his character, his integrity, the love he inspired. Leo met his gaze, a knowing smile gracing his lips. He understood. Elias Thorne, the master carpenter, had finally discovered a new kind of fortune, one measured not in billions, but in the priceless currency of integrity, connection, and a legacy finally restored. Arthur Finch's name, once a whisper lost to time, now shone brighter than ever. The grand hall of Thorne and Finch, usually reserved for showcasing Elias's latest innovations, had been transformed. Soft spotlights illuminated an exhibit titled Arthur Finch, Master Craftsman, The Unseen Signature. Visitors murmured with admiration as they passed display cases holding Arthur's original hand-drawn sketches, his well-worn tools, and, at the center, a beautifully crafted piece of furniture showcasing the distinctive starburst joint. Elias Thorne stood proudly beside Leo, no longer the detached magnate but a humble guide. Arthur believed that the joint wasn't just about strength, Elias explained to a small crowd, his voice resonating with genuine respect, but about telling a story of connection, of how disparate pieces come together to create something stronger, more beautiful. Leo, beaming, added, And he taught me that every piece of wood has a soul waiting to be revealed. Eleanor Green, the library director, watched from a distance, a serene smile gracing her lips. The community, once captivated by a stolen legacy, now embraced the true story, a testament to authenticity. From a volunteer at St. Jude's to a rising star on the national stage, Leo Maxwell's journey was a testament to honesty and mentorship. Months later, at a prestigious national woodworking competition, the air crackled with anticipation. Leo, poised and confident, stood on stage, accepting the coveted Artisan of the Year award. His winning piece, a stunning console table, featured the celebrated starburst joint, its brilliance now proudly attributed to Arthur Finch. "I owe this, and everything I know, to two incredible men," Leo said, his voice clear and strong. "To my grandfather, Arthur Finch, who taught me not just how to work wood, but how to live with integrity, and to Elias Thorne, my mentor, who taught me the courage to face the truth and the joy of building a legacy on honesty." In the audience, Elias watched, a profound sense of pride and peace washing over him. This was a success he hadn't stolen, a triumph he hadn't bought. This was real. Elias's grand study, once a sterile symbol of his solitary success, had been redecorated. It was now filled with personal touches: Leo's small, intricate carvings, Eleanor Green's favorite classic novels, and, prominently displayed, Arthur Finch's old, lovingly maintained hand tools. Elias sat in his favorite armchair, the silver compass Arthur had given him years ago, cool and familiar in his palm. He traced its tarnished lines, remembering Arthur's words, "Always find your true north, Elias." He had lost his way for decades, blinded by ambition, but the compass, through Leo, had guided him home. He felt connected to Arthur now, a thread of integrity that spanned generations, woven not through blood, but through shared craft, shared truth, and shared forgiveness. This was the richer life Arthur had always known, and Elias had finally found it. Elias Thorne built an empire, but his true legacy was built on courage. The story of Elias, Arthur, and Leo reminds us that the greatest achievements are not measured in wealth or accolades, but in the integrity we reclaim, the wrongs we right, and the authentic connections we forge. It's a testament to the enduring power of truth and forgiveness, showing us that even after years of silence, the heart can heal, and a new, more meaningful legacy can emerge. It reminds us that our true inheritance is the honesty we build and the connections we honor. If Elias's journey from regret to redemption touched your heart, please let us know in the comments below. What would you have done in Elias's position? Would you have confessed or kept the secret buried? Your thoughts matter. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a story about the enduring power of integrity, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will move you, inspire you, and remind you of the extraordinary stories hidden within ordinary lives.